Hi everyone, today we're covering ventricular system and cerebrospinal fluid. So ventricles are basically fluid-filled cavities which are located within the brain. So very important, we have a lateral ventricle, we have two lateral ventricles, then we have third ventricle and we also have fourth ventricle. So we are going to study all of these in detail. And what about cerebrospinal fluid? Cerebrospinal fluid is basically a colorless and a plain solution, which is a clear solution, sorry. It's a clear colorless solution which is found in not only inside the central nervous system but also outside the central nervous system. So it's a clear colorless solution which is found not only in the central nervous system but also outside the nervous system. So in the central nervous system, you will find it in ventricles. And when you talk about outside the central nervous system, you're going to find it in the subarachnoid space. Now you may be wondering what is subarachnoid space. So your brain has three layers, which is pia matter, arachnoid matter, and dura matter, right? So these are the three layers which are covering your not just brain but also the spinal cord. So basically your what do you call it? Entire central nervous system has these meningeal coverings. So these meningeal coverings are pia matter, arachnoid matter, and dura matter. So between the pia and arachnoid matter, so pia is like the innermost covering which lines the just around your brain matter. So if this is your brain matter, let's say cerebral hemisphere, just around it there'll be a very thin layer that will be the pia matter. So between the pia matter and arachnoid matter, that space is called subarachnoid space. So yes, coming back, we were talking about the cerebrospinal fluid. It's a clear, colorless solution which is found not only in central nervous system but also outside the central nervous system, around the central nervous system. So in the central nervous system, you'll find it in ventricles. And what are ventricles? They are fluid-filled cavities which are there located in the brain, right? And I told you you have two lateral ventricles, and then you have a third ventricle, and then you have a fourth ventricle. And around the central nervous system, you'll find the CSF in the subarachnoid space, which is the space between the pia matter and the arachnoid matter. Perfect. Now let me draw this diagram. Here you can see this is your cerebral cortex, right? The cerebral hemisphere. Then this is the midbrain. Very important, midbrain. Then you have pons. Then you have medulla, and then you have the spinal cord. So this is your midbrain, the mesencephalon, and this is your rhomencephalon, the hindbrain, which has pons and medulla, and you'll also have the cerebellum here, right? So when you talk about the fluid-filled cavities, the ventricles, let's begin in your cerebral hemisphere. So right here, you'll see this is the lateral ventricle, which begins in the cerebral hemisphere. So this is the lateral ventricle. Let me just jot it down that this is the lateral ventricle, and these are two lateral ventricles. Then right here, these are thalami, very important, these are thalami, and between the thalami, you're going to find the third ventricle. So do not ever forget this, that wherever you find anyone talking about the third ventricle, you should be very clear cut in your knowledge that third ventricle is found between the thalamus. So you'll find it between the thalami. So that's the third ventricle. So lateral and third. And as I already told you, this is the midbrain. So in the midbrain region, if you can recall, we studied the cerebral aqueduct. So this is your cerebral aqueduct. And then this is your pons and medulla. So at the junction of pons and medulla, you will find the fourth ventricle. And fourth ventricle is right here. Then in the spinal cord, these ventricles continue as central canal, and just at the terminal end of the spinal cord or at the terminal end of the central canal, you'll find this terminal ventricle, which is basically a dilatation of this inferior end of the central canal. So this is your terminal ventricle, and this is your spinal cord. Yes. So let's recall. First of all, lateral ventricles right here in your cerebral hemispheres. Then you have third ventricle, which is between the thalami, then cerebral aqueduct in the midbrain. Then you have it dilates here. This is the fourth ventricle at the junction of pons and medulla, and then you have this central canal in the spinal cord and then terminal ventricle. So this must be clear cut. If anyone asks you any information about the position or the location of the ventricles, so it should be clear to you that lateral ventricle, you find them in the cerebral hemisphere, right? And cerebral hemisphere, this is a part of your prosencephalon, right? You have your forebrain, prosencephalon, and prosencephalon forebrain, it's divided into your telencephalon and diencephalon. When you talk about telencephalon are the cerebral hemispheres. So that's where your lateral ventricle is located. And diencephalon are the internal structures of your forebrain. For example, thalamus, hypothalamus, right? All of that. So in the diencephalon, you have the third ventricle. So in diencephalon, between the thalami, you have third ventricle. In telencephalon, you have the lateral ventricle. So they can question you like this, that what is the cavity of the telencephalon? So lateral ventricle is the cavity of the telencephalon. Third ventricle is the cavity of the diencephalon. Mesencephalon, so which is the midbrain. So what's the cavity of the midbrain? Cerebral aqueduct is the cavity of the midbrain. And if you talk about rhombencephalon is the hindbrain. It consists of your pons, medulla, and the cerebellum. So pons, medulla, and cerebellum, their cavity is the fourth ventricle. So rhombencephalon's cavity is the fourth ventricle. So this is according to the positions. Now moving forward. And what is the cavity of the spinal cord? You have central canal. So we have basically covered everything. Now, moving forward, you should know that your CSF, it consists of, obviously, it has sodium, it has calcium, it has water, it has glucose also, but glucose concentration is obviously way less compared to the concentration of glucose in the blood. And then it also has a trace of protein, and even more important, it has almost 0 to 3 lymphocytes per cubic millimeter. So this is the concentration of the white blood cell. Which one particularly? Lymphocytes. So there are 0 to 3 lymphocytes per cubic millimeter. And yeah, so this is basically the entire concentration. Now, if you talk about the volume of your CSF, so CSF volume that basically circulates around your uh, um, central nervous system and in the central nervous system, both around and in the central nervous system. So the volume is 150 ml, right? What's the volume? 150 ml. And if you talk about, let me write this in green. So 150 ml is the volume, and 0 0.5 ml is produced per minute. This is produced per minute. And how much is produced per day? If you calculate, you'll figure out that 500 ml, almost half a liter, is produced per day, per 24 hour, you can say. So this is produced per day. But how much do you have at any given time? At any given time, you will have 150 ml. So this is present at any given time. So what about the remaining amount? What about the remaining 350? Because it was producing 500 per day, but you have 150 at any given time. So what about the remaining 350? So this tells you that there should be a drainage system as well.